and today we're making DIY clay beads. So I've got all of my supplies right here, keychain rings, leather, these little skewers right here, which are going to come in handy, lots of different colors of oven-baked clay, and some clay tools. So to get started, I'm going to just be using the clay, so everything else I can slide to the sides. And you can pick any color to start with. I'm going to start with this lovely magenta because I haven't had a chance to work with it yet. You only need a very small amount for each of these beads, and there's a lot of different ways that you can shape them into geometric shapes, squares, circles. You can even marble the clay, swirling the colors together. I'm going to start by making just a simple circle clay bead. So all I want to do is just roll it in a ball on a flat, smooth, dry surface until it's perfectly even, perfectly cylindrical, or spherical, excuse me. And you can even put it in both of your hands and just keep working it into a ball. Once you have it nice and even, then we're going to take these skewers. We just need one. We've got our clay bead. And we're just going to poke it through. Now I'm actually twisting it as I poke it through, and that's so that it doesn't put as much pressure on the clay itself and contort the shape. If I give it a little twist back and forth, then I can keep the shape a lot closer to what it is now without altering it too much. If it smushes, if one of your sides becomes flat as you poke it through with the skewer, that's okay. Once you pull it back out, you can just fix it on up. Now it's always good to know how you're going to use these clay beads before you put them in the oven, because you're going to need to know if that hole is big enough for whatever you're stringing it through. In this case, I'm stringing it through this leather, and this leather's a little bit thick, so I know that I need these holes for the beads nice and wide. To make the hole wider, once you have your skewer in there, what I can do is actually move the skewer around, and that's going to start to widen that hole, which is a great tactic for anyone that's stringing this on leather or anything that's thick. Just move the skewer around in a circle and back and forth, and it'll make that hole wider. Great. So we've got our first bead done. I'm pretty pleased with it, so I'm just going to set this to the side and let's make a new one. So I like this green, this dark green. I think that'll look really nice with the magenta. So again, I'm just going to use a really small piece. This time I'm going to make a square bead. So I'm actually going to use my hands as pressure points, and I'm just going to squeeze it back and forth in each direction. Just keep squeezing it, and that's going to form it into a square shape. Now it's not perfect. I'm sure you can see that I still have these lines right here, but if you just keep smushing it around on all of the sides, eventually those will go away. Once those are gone and the sides are nice and flat, then we can smooth those surfaces a little bit more thoroughly, and we'll poke the hole with the skewer again. So this square bead is pretty much done. I've just been squeezing it back and forth this whole time. And now we're ready to poke the hole to make it into a bead. So you can choose any side, and we're going to use the same technique that we did for the circle. Now one thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this is perfectly centered. I want it to go through the other side also perfectly centered. So with a sphere, it can really be a little bit more intuitive with how you poke it, but this one you need to be really careful to make sure you get it just right. So again, I'm just twisting that skewer, and I twist the skewer just so it doesn't put as much pressure on the clay, and so that we don't distort the shape, because we already like the shape. And here it's coming out through the other side, which is pretty much centered, so I'm feeling good about that. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this skewer around in a circle to make the hole of the bead bigger so that the leather I'm going to use is going to fit through here. So I'm just moving it around in a circle, back and forth. Great. Now it looks pretty good, but one thing I've noticed is that I do have some of my fingerprints in here, which I certainly don't want in the finished piece. So once we have that hole poked through, I am going to just tap the edges a little bit more and even use my fingertip to smooth the surfaces until I'm able to physically remove any of those fingerprints. If you don't see them, then you're not going to see them in the finished piece. Any flaws that you see in your wet clay, you're going to see in your finished fired clay as well. So just make sure that you smooth it out while it's still wet. For something like this, you can also use a clay tool. I was definitely struggling to get those last little bits of my fingerprints out of this. So what I can do is just use something that's a little bit flatter, something that's a little bit smoother, and just make sure that you're touching as little of the bead as possible, and just use the side of your clay tool and just smooth it out. So now we've got our finished square bead. We've got our circle and we've got our square, and now we're going to make one more. And let's use a little bit of this white clay because I think that's going to look really cool with the green and the pink. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a longer, kind of a bean-shaped bead. This is way too much clay. Kind of like a tube shape. So basically like a long cylinder. So what I want to do is I'm just rolling the clay against the table, and I want to make a snake shape. I'm just going to keep rolling this clay on the table, making my snake, and then I don't want it to get too long. I want it to stay nice and fat. So once I get it into the shape that I like, I'm actually squeezing both ends, and then I just put my hands around it, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze on each end, which fattens it up so that I can continue to roll it until I get like that perfect balance of it being the length that I want and it also being nice and smooth around the edges. And I just squeeze the sides and then roll the center, and it looks pretty good. We do have, I'm not sure if the camera is going to pick this up, but we do have just the tiniest little striations of green, almost like a tiny touch of marbling. But I actually love the way that looks. I'm really happy with that, so I'm going to keep it. There's one little piece of dust that I picked up from the table. That will always happen no matter how clean your surfaces are. There's still just like rogue things that end up around. If that happens, just pull it out and just start fresh and just clean up anything you need to clean up. Now again, I'm going to poke my hole with this skewer. This bead is really long, so I'm going to need to be very careful to make sure that the skewer goes through straight and that it comes out the opposite end in the very center without it being on the side or even coming out the side of the bead. So just go slowly, and hopefully you'll know by about halfway if you're on target. Go nice and slow and just make sure that you're twisting your skewer. And I think mine seems like it's on target. Yeah, so now it's poking through the other side. It's slightly on the edge, but what I'm actually going to do is as I squeeze this bead into place and continue to squeeze it into that cylinder shape, that tube shape that I'm looking for, that's actually going to even it out a little bit. So now I've got it poked all the way through. and I'm going to wiggle the skewer around in a circle to make the hole bigger so that the leather will fit through. And once we have that hole big enough, then I'm just going to pull that skewer right back out. We can touch up any sides that need to be touched up after the skewer comes out and before we bake it in the oven. So like this side, for example, I'm just going to tap this down, tap it into place to smooth it out a little bit more. Same thing with this side. And that looks pretty good. And let's take a look at this in comparison to the other beads that we made. So it looks like our beads are ready to be fired. So we've got 3 right here. And what we're going to do now that we have these ready, we're going to put them in the oven at 275 for about 15 minutes. Your instructions on any oven baked clay are going to tell you to bake it at 300 degrees. Don't do it, because if any oven is slightly hotter than what you think it is, if it's actually 315, 320 degrees instead of 300 degrees, you can burn the clay. The clay will turn brown and crispy in a very short amount of time. So I actually recommend that you do it at a slightly lower temperature, 275, and that if you need to, just increase the number of minutes to about 18 instead of 15. What you're looking for is the shininess on these beads is going to go away, the clay is going to become matte, and instead of it being sticky to the touch, it's actually going to be really smooth and dry to the touch. That's when you know the beads are done and they're ready to come out of the oven. Now we've got our finished clay beads. These just came out of the oven. They're nice and dry. They're not sticky or tacky at all. That's how we know that they're done. And there's a couple of different ways that we can string these. I have some leather right here. We've got this beautiful turquoise leather, but I actually like this one right here. So all we need to do to string it is just place it right on this leather. From here, we can make it into a necklace. We can make it into a bracelet. But I'm actually going to make mine into a keychain. And to do that, I'm going to make a knot on one end. And then I'm going to slide the beads all the way to that knot. I need my knot to be nice and tight, so pull it really hard. Now I've got my beads setting right on that knot, and I'm going to string the other side through a keychain loop. And then I'm going to make another knot. Again, I want this knot to be firmly up against those beads. Just make it nice and tight. And make sure you pull that really, really firm. And from here, all we have to do are trim the ends. Just like that. And we've got our new keychain. My name is Brittany Bly. I'm the founder of Pop Shop America. This is the March Craft and Style subscription box. If you want to find out more, visit popshopamerica.com. For more videos like this, like and subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and happy crafting!